Prepare to step into a world where imagination knows no bounds as we present Legends, Loot, and Lore. Join your hosts, Andrew and Joe, the dice-rolling dynamic duo who will guide you every step of the way into the realm of Dungeons & Dragons. From crafting narratives to character creation, this podcast is your gateway to becoming the hero of your own story. Whether you're a new adventurer or a seasoned traveler seeking new insights, Legends, Loot, and Lore has something for everyone. After the episode, visit our website at www.legendslootandlore.com for even more resources and exclusive content. And if you're as passionate about this adventure as we are, help support our quest at legendslootandlore.supercast.com. Embark on this odyssey with us and let the echoes of ancient tales guide you toward a destiny filled with limitless possibilities. Roll for initiative, because your adventure begins now.
Welcome, weary travelers and curious minds, to another enchanting chapter of Legends, Loot, and Lore. Joe and I are your humble guides through realms both known and unknown.
Hello.
And it is our immense pleasure to have you join us today for a captivating exploration into the boundless world of Dungeons and Dragons. So gather around, stoke the fires of your imagination, and prepare to embark on a journey that will stir your heart and ignite your spirit. Ready yourselves, for within these tales lie not only characters, but echoes of the choices we make, the alliances we forge, and the destinies that beckon. As we embark upon this odyssey of imagination, may you find inspiration anew and a yearning to etch your own name into the annals of Legends, Loot, and Lore. As the dice are cast and fate unfurls its threads, let us embark together into a world of wonder and magic. Welcome one and all to this chapter of Legends, Loot, and Lore.
I'm excited, Andrew. Are you?
I am really excited. I really enjoyed our conversation on the first 6 classes. I've been really itching to talk about some of these. I mean, obviously, I have expressed my love for the monk and that class, but there are some really fun ones in here. I have yet to play a paladin. I've done the ranger. I've done sorcerer and wizard. I've done a lot of the spellcasters. Even tried my hand at a rogue, which I wasn't it didn't really click for me, but
Well, I think the adventure that you were playing that into wasn't exactly the most conducive for it.
Perhaps. But I'm a big fan of the spellcasters. I love, like I think you were saying this, that you really like the fact that they've got a variety of spells to cast, so it's not just that one trick pony of swinging a sword or an axe. So you've got some variety to the gameplay there, which is really helps it not get monotonous.
Unfortunately, sometimes when you're playing a spellcaster, you end up picking your favorite spells and casting them over and over. And anyway,
magic missile.
Yeah, exactly. You use that constantly. But like the idea is, like, it allows more variety, because even though you can pick your favorite spells, you can do other things. And while you favored the monk, I don't know if it's just because it was the first character I played to a completion of a campaign, I favor the wizard. I've always kind of favored the wizard class. When I made my first character, I made a paladin, and I enjoyed playing the paladin, but I think it might be because I played it to the completion of the campaign. The wizard, it just resonates a little bit more with me, and we'll talk about it when we get there. But it also might do with the fact that I think I've always liked the wizard in general, even before I understood a lot about D&D. The wizard always appealed to me.
It was funny. My first character that I played was a wizard, Fiang. Now, for anyone listening to the podcast, there is another podcast that I'm a big fan of, what is called Hello from the Magic Tavern, and Fiang is actually a wizard. One of the characters on that show is this wizard named Fiang. So that's where I got the name. I kind of stole the name there because I was just such a big fan of that show. But anyway, it was funny. I have heard the wizard as a class get made fun of
a lot
because it's the wizard has to carry his book of spells around. So he's got to read over the spells to kind of remember them and draw power from them. It's like a sorcerer. He's just been given his power. He's got the natural ability. Warlocks, get it from the
patrons,
from their patrons. Other ones just are natural spellcasters. But the wizard, he's got to carry his book around and remember all of his book of spells. So it's like, we're just gifted with spells. We can just cast them whenever we want. You on the other hand have to carry this book around and remember them all. And
well, when we get to the wizards, I'm going to tell you one of the reasons why I liked my particular wizard when we get there.
I can't wait to hear.
Before we do this,
Yes.
you forgot something.
What did I forget?
We got to go through what happened Monday night on the campaign.
What happened Monday night?
Well,
yes.
You all died. I mean, no. So what happened was...
let's
recap.
Let's hit the recap.
So you guys had made it to the island and...
iceberg.
The iceberg, I apologize.
Yes.
You made it to the iceberg. You found
in the sea of floating ice.
In the sea of floating ice. You found the town that is inside this iceberg with the jagged wall around it that are peaks. You were able to make a successful negotiation and honorable combat with the leaders of this tribe,
right,
who then attempted to poison you and failed to poison most of you. And then the cleric, who is the shaman of the village, had connected with Bill's character, Toma, and showed them a secret way into the dragon's lair with the intent to kill the dragon for her because she was afraid that the dragon would eventually be the end of her entire tribe.
Right.
We ended with you sneaking around incredibly well for a dwarf fighter, I might add, into a room full of kobolds.
I've got mad crazy stealth.
You do. You absolutely do. So we ended with
I think it's a +7.
Yeah. Which is unusual for a dwarf, especially a dwarf fighter. So we ended with you walking into this room where there's 12 kobolds and they all look up at you and you go, absolute ape. And that's where we ended. So you didn't explain this in the game at all, but you have a distinct hatred of kobolds.
Yes, I do.
Was there something in the back? Did you create a backstory and put it onto the character sheet that I should go read? Or is it something you can share here?
I kind of created it on the fly.
Oh, right there at that moment.
Right there at that moment.
Okay, so do you have something deeper than the fly?
I have to flesh this out, but yeah, so Thoradin Ironbeard, the mountain dwarf fighter, has a sincere dislike of kobolds. So I don't know why yet. So I have to work on my own lore for my character and the backstory. You figure Thoradin is over 250 years old. So at some point,
maybe he just doesn't like non-dwarf creatures his own size.
It might be something like that. I'm the only one that's
racist.
I'm the heightest.
Racist.
Can't be racist.
He hates anybody who's a non-dwarf that's his size.
It's a height thing. It's not a race thing.
It's a non-dwarf thing.
It's a height thing.
Okay.
Not racist. Heightest. I am heightest. I am anti anybody my own height.
I except other dwarves.
Sure. They're okay. You don't see me hanging around any other dwarves, so I don't know. But anyway.
Well, you were part of an entire mission to decide whether or not the dwarves should join the alliance. So.
Yeah, so I am pro anti-dragon.
Pro anti-dragon.
I
am pro alliance against the dragon.
I am for killing dragons. So I definitely have an issue with dragons and their minions. So
maybe you could pick that up with the kobolds. They're dragon-esque.
Exactly. Anything kind of dragon related, I take issue with, whether they're very large dragons or tiny little dwarf sized dragons. I will
So
I don't like them.
I took it as you walking into this room. And as you walked in there, you see these dozen kobolds, and you, underneath your breath, you pull out your hammer. Kobolds. Damn kobolds. And you charged. And you charged so ineffectually. You hit one. Oh no, you hit 2 out of 3, right?
I think I hit 2 out of 3.
You hit 2 out of 3. You missed the second one. So you hit the first one. You came back with the backswing on the second one. You overcompensated, and you hit the third one, and thus the combat began.
Yes.
While it was
maybe I was gonna say maybe it's more like Indiana Jones. Snakes. I hate snakes.
Kobolds. I hate kobolds.
That's maybe like when I walked in here and just saw just a room full of kobolds.
I think that's it. I think that's it.
Yeah.
So after a somewhat lengthy combat, because there were 12 of them, you guys completely wiped them out, and you started exploring room to room in what was basically turned out to be the inner circle of rooms on what is easily enough described as the first subfloor. And there are 4 rooms there, and you've gone through all 4 of the rooms, and you get to the 4th room, and you see that there's a ladder that goes up in the 4th room. And as you're looking around the ladder, you see that there's a guy laying in a bed at the foot of the ladder.
Suspicious.
So everybody sits there and is like, what's up with this guy? So the guy pops up, and he basically tells you that he's sitting here, and he's down here because he's sick, and they're hoping that he will get better, because down inside the ice is actually slightly warmer than being outside in the village and all the wind and everything like that. So they're saying that it's better for him. This launched into at least, after asking a few basic questions, this launched into at least a 15-minute back and forth between Matens, Toma. I don't know if Thoradin really got into it. Einar got in on the conversation, whether or not they should kill him or take him along. And things had just about settled.
I was just trying to find a compromise because I didn't like either of the outcomes.
Well, yes, that's true. And right as you were, Toma was about to say, look, we're just going to tie the guy up and drag him behind us and we'll keep him there. Right as Toma was ready to do that, here comes Matens is like, hey. Now, the cat is played by, Matens is played by our friend Cat, who made a big show of checking her character sheet. Yep, chaotic evil, and chopped off this guy's head. And that was the end of the argument. It was like, that's it, no more. That's the end of it. And that's where we kind of ended for the night, because that argument went on way too long. I really should have cut the argument off, but it was so much fun seeing like this vicious circle of Toma constantly trying to like be the good guy, which is what he's supposed to do.
Right.
And in arguing against what was arguably a murder hobo.
Well, I think it was a perfectly played role play scenario.
Yes.
Because everybody was kind of playing their part. Toma, who is the half-orc paladin?
Yep.
So he is righteously trying to reunite this. Well, because he healed. I don't think you mentioned he healed.
That's true. Toma healed this man.
He healed the man of whatever illness had befallen him. So he wanted to return him to the tribe. And Matens had a lot of distrust of this person. And well, I think a lot of the rest of the party really didn't necessarily trust that he was on the up and up. So I as kind of the 250-year-old dwarf who's been through plenty, was just like, listen, let's not, I don't like the idea of killing him, but I don't necessarily trust him enough to let him loose. Like, let's just drag him along with us and see what happens. Like I said, if all else fails, we can feed him to the dragon.
Yeah.
But then Kat perfectly played her character Matens and said, enough talking. Chop off his head for her, or his,
Hugric, her god, his god. So yeah, and then we walked out into the hallway, and I was like, you know what, that's it. It was late enough. We only play 2 hours. That's something else. Just a quick note for you guys: don't worry about playing these 6-hour sessions. I know we talked about it already, but don't worry about playing these 6-hour sessions. We get together once a week. We play 2 hours. Sometimes we get a lot further than we do in other times, but hey, we just get together and we have a lot of fun. It means the campaign lasts a lot longer, and sometimes that can make it a little stale, but you fit in what you can fit in, People have kids, people have responsibilities.
People have lives.
Exactly. This is not supposed to be an all-inclusive, this is my entire life. This is meant to be like, hey, this is a great thing to do with however many hours I can legitimately spare from my life and all the necessities of my life to have fun.
Well, it's funny. So we play for a couple hours on a Monday night. My neighbor Fable, they played with their high school group on a Saturday for 10 hours.
Oh yeah.
It was hysterical. You could hear them screaming and yelling and having a fantastic time, which I thought was amazing. But so it can, it all depends on the group.
Those type of sessions really need to be in person though. If you can't do like a 10-hour session like that. I did a 6.5-hour session one time on a one shot online, and it does not work because the people that you need to be able to have the side conversations at the table, otherwise everybody just gets bored.
Right.
And if you're going to do those longer sessions, make sure it's in person. But anyway, we digress.
Yes. So that was the backstory of this past Monday's adventure, which was a lot of fun.
Which is also a very nice introduction to our first topic of the Paladin, because Toma plays the Paladin, and his entire argument is based upon everything that a Paladin is about.
Let's do it. Let's talk about Paladins. So the kind of quick general description of a Paladin is a divine warrior class, guided by strict code of ethics and holy devotion. They really blend. It's a combination of the martial prowess with the weapons and also divine spell casting. They kind of weave these two together to combat the forces of evil. It's interesting. They're known for their unwavering commitment to justice, as well as their healing abilities. And
that fits Toma to a T.
I really appreciate Toma on healing me several times already, which has been very nice. And the ability to smite their foes with divine power. They're the ones with all the smites.
Yes. Now, we'll
smiting.
get into...
I like the idea of smiting things.
It's very interesting. We'll get into the whole concept of the smites when we get into the classes more specifically. However, the main aspect of the Paladin is a divine smite, which when you hit allows you to use a spell slot and get an extra 2d8 damage. So that's a pretty hefty increase. And it's 3d8 if it happens to be an undead creature. So the Paladins are this power of righteousness, very much against the idea of the undead and anything that might circle around them. Thus their extra boost on using their special ability to deal the extra d8 on the undead creatures.
So let me ask you this question. How does the background of a paladin differ from a cleric? So a cleric derives their spellcasting abilities from their faith in a deity. How does that differ from a paladin and kind of what they're doing?
So it's very similar. But I think when we went through the cleric, I think the cleric gets their power from their deity or their chosen power, and they have that by an association. Mm-hmm. And like the description said, that's not always a voluntary association.
Right.
I think the idea of a paladin is more zealous. This is, instead of the cleric saying, I'm going to go smite you, I'm going to go hit you for this person or that person, it's more like the paladin not only just worships or supports their deity or being, they're all over that. I can't even think of the right word. I had it and I lost it. Their very being, they worship this being. Their entire concept, their entire being is to support this deity. And they obtain their power by the deity granting them the power based upon their, almost like their ability to worship them and how much power, how much faith that they have in their deity. Whereas the cleric, I think, is a little less about that personal faith and more about, I believe in the ideals of my deity. I think this is a little bit more about like, I believe in my God to give me the power.
So this makes me think of, because I was doing all the research for these classes and everything, and the one thing that came up was they kind of reference King Arthur in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. just this wholehearted belief in what their righteous cause, and it's that's kind of what they draw this power from their, like I said, the cause that they are.
Right. Their whole being is more about the cause and the faith in their leader, their deity, and less about like asking for it and more about like, you're going to give it to me because I believe in the righteousness of all things.
Right. So let's talk about the quick build.
Oh yeah.
Let's talk about the quick build for a paladin. So right off the bat, the first thing they recommend is your first ability score that you should be focused on is strength.
Yes.
And you really want to make sure this is when you're rolling the dice for your various ability scores, you really want to aim high for this one. So if that's going to be a combination of whatever you roll and maybe the ability score improvement that comes at 4th level, however you get there, you want to try to really put a lot of heft and put a lot of points behind your strength score, or
perhaps a racial bonus that you can use with it, like the Dragonborn +2 to strength.
Right. Dragonborn with the +2 to strength is a great addition. So a Dragonborn paladin is
actually not an unheard of idea, and I haven't heard of a lot of them, but there are a few of them out there. You can look for them; they're there.
Yeah, and I would say, a human paladin would be.
Well, you get +1 to everything.
They get a +1 to everything, so that would be a good one as well. So strength is the first one you want to focus on.
A half-orc wouldn't be a bad option either. Toma is a half-orc paladin, so he feeds into that strength modifier. But then after strength
is charisma. And why, Joe, is charisma so important for a paladin?
Why, Andrew, I'm very glad that you asked.
You're welcome.
That's not scripted at all. No, so the charisma is very powerful, very important, because the charisma is your spellcasting modifier. When your charisma is where you are devoting yourself to your deity. So the idea of how powerful your worship is, how strong your belief is, how forceful your presence is in this whole thing is that charisma. So you want to make sure that that's high, so that anything that you cast as a spell that'll have a basis of modifying somehow up or down, that modifier will be based upon your charisma.
Yeah, I think this is a tough class to play, only because you want to really leverage both of those scores, strength and charisma. So it's tough if you don't roll well.
You could end up with a subpar paladin.
You could have a very strong paladin. So with strength, so you could be great with your martial weapons, but you may not do so great on the spell casting.
Right.
Or if you choose to put your emphasis on the charisma, maybe he's not as great a
right. And that's personal preference mixed with whatever roles you have, or unless you use the point buy system or the standard array, which we'll talk about those things when we do our character creation episode. But so the interesting thing here is one of the recommendations for a paladin is also a half elf. When I played a paladin for a brief period of time, I actually was a half elf because of the charisma bonus and because of the additional customization that you can do with the half elf. I was able to tweak it up and bring up my strength and bring up my charismas. So it's a very fitting class for it, because a half elf is going to be feeling kind of excluded from both humans and elves.
Right.
And by having that exclusion, they're going to turn around and they're going to turn around and feel the unrighteousness of that situation and try to balance the universe by helping righteousness.
Interesting take on that. I never thought about that. Thirdly, you want to, again, we talk about this a lot. I mean, dexterity and constitution, but constitution, we talk about it being the third one. And I think that's going to be your HP.
Yeah. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody else describe it this way, but the last episode you described it beautifully this way, as a great middle ability, stats, because it really is like constitution is important, and there's going to be times it's going to be a second. It's very rarely a first.
Right.
I don't think it's ever been a first in any of the recommendations.
I don't think so.
But it sometimes is a second, like a fighter or a barbarian. You're getting up in there. They want you to have it. But it's a perfect middle stat that you want on the top. You want this in your top 3 to make sure your HP is as high as possible, unless you're doing a very specific type of character. But I think you described it very well that way.
Yeah, I always feel like it's strength, charisma, wisdom, and intelligence are kind of at the top or the bottom. Yeah, and that constitution and dexterity are always playing, kind of swapping each other out. Which one gets priority in those middle abilities? Because it's either you're focusing on higher HP or higher AC. Depending on which one you prioritize.
Which first is also going to be based upon your race, your class, the campaign, everything like that. So, but yeah, you nailed it. I think that.
Excellent. So that covers, I think, a lot of, they talk about, so I don't want to cut this too short, but they also talk about choosing the noble background.
Yeah. The noble background fits, back in the day, in the Middle Ages, the firstborn tended to be the noble of the family who would continue on ruling the land. Right. The secondborn tended to be the fighter, the warrior, the guy who's in the military, and the thirdborn went into the clergy.
Okay.
And I've always thought of this as a noble background being as one of those thirdborns who goes into the clergy, but hey, I don't want to become a regular old-fashioned priest, and they became the paladin to uphold that righteousness. And that thirdborn would probably also have a lot to do with, hey, my brothers picked on me, this, that, and the other thing. Again, fitting in the idea that it was an unrighteous, using a dramatic term for something that was just the brothers bullying their brother, right, trying to create that. So I've always thought of it from that perspective.
That's a really good idea. I like that.
So real quickly before we move on from here, the subclasses that you pick are called oaths. And there is one oath that the basic rules talk about is called an oathbreaker subclass. And is really fleshed out in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So it's not really in the basic rules, but they talk about it. So it's basically an evil paladin. And for a quick reference, Joe Manganiello played a little bit on Critical Role and some other D&D live plays, and he plays an Oathbreaker paladin if you want to go check him out. And he is a Dragonborn.
Interesting. I've watched a little bit of that play, but I haven't.
There's so much.
It's been quite a while.
The problem is it's great stuff, but it's so much. So many episodes, and they're 4, 5, 6 hours a piece. It's like you can stick it in the background sometimes, but it's hard to keep up with.
It really is. Before we jump to our next class, let's run through some of the other class features of the paladin. So the hit dice are 1d10.
Yep.
Again, hit points 10 plus Constitution modifier.
Starting level, right?
Proficiencies. Being the paladin, being the warrior, so you have a proficiency in all armor and shields.
Yep.
As well as a proficiency in simple and martial weapons.
which will cover just about your entire gambit of anything you might want to use for melee and a decent amount for range. They have healing abilities as well to help supplement their righteous cause, but they're not geared for it like the cleric would be.
Right. Yeah. So they'll have some other abilities at first level that we'll dive into when we get into the standalone class episodes. But for now, let's jump into the Ranger.
You played a very successful Ranger in a campaign about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago.
Which character was that?
Shadow. No, Smoke.
Smoke.
You did a great job. We were just talking about him earlier.
Yes, that's right.
And the way Smoke changed shows the versatility of the Ranger in and of themselves.
I love the idea of a Ranger. So kind of a quick description is, again, Ranger, they're skilled trackers. I love the term wilderness warrior.
Yeah, I know it fits in nicely.
I like that. The wilderness warrior. They excel at survival, archery, close combat. I was a big fan of the longbow. That was
you were until you ended up getting those swords at the end of that campaign,
yeah.
which is what I was talking about. How like you were all about the range and you were nailing things with like massive damage that entire campaign, and then you got swords and they were very powerful swords. But I was like, I missed the ranged guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit.
Sure.
The perfect description of a ranger is Aragorn, the ranger. I mean, he really does a little bit of everything. He knew about that little leaf, that weed that would help Frodo.
Right.
You see him using a bow from time to time. He's very good with melee combat. He knows tracking. He knows fields. It's exactly everything that you want to think about a ranger character rolls up right into Aragorn.
They've got some really cool abilities. So they've got a big affinity for nature and the outdoors. Again, they're great at the ranged attacks. Very good at navigating various types of terrain. It's interesting. Similar to the druid, they've got a big environmental bond, which gives them a lot of unique abilities. That helps them both in the combat and while they're traveling around.
And they're called on to defend the fringes of civilization against the encroachment of that wilderness. They walk both lines, whereas a druid may be almost completely in the forest. The ranger kind of walks both sides of the line there.
Yeah, it's a really. I think there's a lot of depth to this type of.
There can be, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun to play.
Yeah.
Like I said, I really dug just because we were talking about this earlier. There was the one battle this road was kind of in the valley, and so we were up on the hillsides on the two sides, and I was farther away, and as the enemies approached, I was just taking my longbow and just nailing them with shots. It was so much fun because
I think because of longbow's range, I think you got 2 attacks before they even got into range, if memory serves.
Oh, before anybody else could run up to them.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh yeah.
I think you took out one and took out half of another one before we even got near them.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So it's a great person to have in the party.
Yeah.
Because I think we've fallen into this trap a lot. Everybody loves the close combat, and it's clearly a lot of fun to go in, swinging a sword, an axe, whatever weapon you've got, to really just run in there and hit somebody. But it's
less tactical than having somebody out in the back shooting the arrow.
Oh yeah,
and that's the other thing is like, you know, there even is an aspect of that character who's got to be more strategic. He's got to figure out maybe he should be targeting this guy instead of that guy. Maybe the combat evolved where, you know what, they just hit 3 big whacks on him. I was focusing on this guy, but let me switch and go hit him because I can take him down if this is a problem guy in the thing. So it becomes a lot more than, like you said, running up and slapping at somebody.
Right. I don't think we've talked about this before, but remember, so think about this. When you run up and are in melee range attacking a an enemy, when you're up in close combat, remember you are now engaged with that person. So if you try to move away from that person, they get an attack of opportunity.
Right.
So you can't just run from one enemy to another, depending on maybe who's the most injured or who needs which of your party needs more help. That's the benefit of something like a ranger who can stay back and pick and choose exactly who's getting each shot every time.
Absolutely.
Instead of just being stuck and engaged with one combatant. I think that's a nice feature to a ranged. Same thing with a wizard, like a spellcaster.
Yep.
But this is just a traditional weaponry.
And that's what I ended up playing a ranger for a brief time in the Strixhaven thing.
Yes.
I was playing an Aragorn, which is a basically bird-looking creature who has wings. And my whole concept was I'm going to fly up 10, 15 feet to get myself out of melee range of anybody, and then start plucking arrows at people. And that's how you play. It's like you don't always get into melee combat, but when you're in melee combat, they have that capability of being being able to handle themselves. They don't have the best armor class, as you'll see when we talk about their proficiencies, but it's really useful. And one of the first things that you need to do when you're building one of these is upping your dexterity score to make sure that bow and arrow is going to be as effective as possible.
It's funny, we were just talking about this, about constitution and dexterity, saying they were mostly middle scores.
Right, but we said, but we also said that constitution's never in the first one, but we didn't mention anything about the dexterity.
Yeah, but dexterity for a ranger is going to be important,
and you're going to see it again when we go to rogue.
Is it for a rogue as well?
Yeah, it is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you're in the quick build, some of the things when you're creating these characters you want to think of, obviously, yes. So dexterity is going to be your highest ability score, and followed by wisdom. And remind me why wisdom is important for a ranger. Is that like the favored enemy terrain type things?
I think it is, but if I'm not mistaken, it's also the spell casting feature. They're using their wisdom, their knowledge of forest of nature to cast their spells. Yes. And if memory serves, their wisdom is their spell modifier.
Got it. Well, that makes perfect sense. But it's interesting because I'm just looking
and that also fits into their survival. Survival is a wisdom feature.
Yeah, that's why I was just looking at that. So they have advantage on survival checks because they get that favored enemy ability at first level. Which is another way to weave some of these abilities into your backstory. So I don't want to dive into this too much because we'll save it for the standalone episodes. But yeah, so you can choose a favorite enemy, and you get advantage on checks regarding that favorite enemy, recalling information about them and things like that. So you can weave all of those abilities that you get into your backstory. But back to the quick build. Now
we're talking about with the ranger that you can use your melee weapons if you choose. So if you wanted to do that, instead of making your dexterity your primary stat, you're going to switch that and make that your strength instead.
Correct.
Drop the dexterity down to 3 or 4 because you're still going to want to have that wisdom. That wisdom is still going to be your spell modifier, so you still want to have that. But your strength can be swapped for your dexterity if you're planning to focus on a ranger who's using melee weapons.
And let's talk about the background, the Outlander.
Yeah, the Outlander. We saw them already, didn't we? We saw them with the barbarians, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're correct.
So the Outlander is kind of like a guy, not quite like a hermit, but kind of as a guy who's drifting in and out of civilization. If you think about, it's going to be funny because you're not going to really put this together immediately. You've seen Waterworld.
I can't say that I've seen Waterworld.
You haven't seen Waterworld. I can't use that example then.
I think based on it, it's
So the whole world has become water except for one little piece of the continent.
I'm familiar with the plot.
Now, Kevin Costner plays this guy who just kind of floats in and out of civilization as it exists currently, in and out, and he exists off of nature, in nature of what it is. So it's a little bit of an extreme example, but this is what an outlander is. It's a person who's kind of in, but they really also are very comfortable, prefer being out, and they survive on the land.
Yeah, so part of the official description is you grew up in the wilds, far from the comforts of town and technology. I think you're talking about kind of like the hermit background as well. Yep. So you've witnessed the migration of herds larger than forests, survived weather more extreme than any city dweller could comprehend, and enjoyed the solitude of being the only thinking creature for miles in any direction.
I love that.
Yeah, it's just, again, whether you're a nomad, an explorer, a recluse, whatever you are. I like even one of the origins is marauder. You can be a marauder, which I thought was which I think is fun, a tribal marauder.
And I think that one would
actually
fit.
Marauder. That
would fit in nicely with the barbarian aspect.
Yeah, oh for sure. So there's some really cool things with that Outlander background that you can play with. But that's just one of many.
Numerous.
But if you want to play a kind of typical ranger, that's the background you would go with.
Yeah.
So there are also some races that are kind of geared toward a ranger. We're not going to get too deep into them, but again, things like some of the dwarves and humans. Obviously, humans with the +1 to everything is a good one. Wood elves, get that +1 to wisdom and a +2 to dex. So it's a perfect ranger combination there.
And I think the reason why so many classes fit into the ranger is because you can be dexterous with it. You can use strength or dexterity as your primary stat, and a lot of different races will fit between those two different bases. So it's a lot to do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of good races to play, but that's just some of the things you might want to think about. But again, we're just talking about the races and the basic rules. There are so many more races that have been added on with all the other books and everything like that. So
not to mention the homebrew.
Yeah, I mean, it's the possibilities are almost endless. But again, we're staying with the basic rules, so the easiest way to get started and go from there. Now, for some of the class features for a ranger, their hit dice as well are the 1d10.
Yep.
So they've got the same things going on there. There are proficiencies now with armor, just light armor and medium armor and shields. Because I don't necessarily think of a ranger really wearing armor.
Well, yeah. So you got to remember, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's called the barded armor, the leather armor that has the metal on it. That's classified.
Studded armor.
Studded armor. Thank you.
Studded armor.
That's classified as a medium armor, if memory serves.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure you can look that up, but I'm pretty sure that's a medium armor. So I can still see a ranger wearing something like that. But I agree.
Yeah.
Typically, there would just be leather or furs or something to that effect. Yeah. So and in the same vein, in my head, I can't think of too many ranger-like characters who are using a shield, but I can still see it from a certain standpoint, because the shield, it gives you a +2 and it doesn't cost you anything except a free hand.
Yeah, see, because I still have rangers stuck in my head as ranged fighters. So I feel like armor and shields kind of get in the way of drawing a bow and shooting arrows. So like that's kind of where my head is at. So I think that's where your point, but yeah.
I think that's where it's supposed to be. I think the ranger is at its heart is more of a ranged character who has some melee capabilities. However, this particular class, when 5e first came out, a lot of people disliked the ranger, severely disliked the ranger. I mean, it was considered to be one of the more hated classes of the entire thing. And I think that had to do with the fact that it was so vague in different aspects that people didn't know how to assert themselves in there. So I think at the end of the day, we're adapting to, we're thinking of a ranger as a range, but it can be a close in.
Right. And again, with weapons, proficiencies in simple martial weapons, they've got some saving throw proficiencies in strength and dexterity.
Yeah.
Which again make
perfect sense
for
out in the
ranger.
wild. Yeah. In the wilderness.
Now I want to point this one out just in particular because I always look at kind of what are some of the inspirations for in pop culture for rangers, and this one just really stands out to me. Katniss Everdeen.
Oh, absolutely.
I think is probably like the ideal kind of stereotype of what a ranger would be, with her bow and arrow prowess and she's just got that great ranger.
Well, I'm sorry, I still think Aragorn trumps that, but yes, I
sure.
agree.
I'm talking about more. Aragorn is definitely.
Yeah.
I think he's probably the
quintessential.
The quintessential inspiration for the ranger class. In modern times, if you want to talk more modern, who mimics that kind of those kind of abilities would be someone like Katniss Everdeen.
Now, for all you Disney lovers, that'd be kind of Merida, I believe in Merida, which was very much a character who enjoyed the bow and was very much into living more of a wild lifestyle, despite her noble Scottish parents.
Again, a great backstory for
fantastic
for writing a ranger character.
And one of the last things that kind of popped up was Hawkeye from Marvel fame. I mean, come on, obviously the guy uses a bow, but when you check him out, Hawkeye is not just this, guy who sits back and plucks a bow. He gets into combat all the time. He's running around, punching people, slapping them with the bow, and then shooting somebody 30 feet away with the arrow. Not something you can practically do in D&D, but there are ways to make something like that function. Just remember, you can't run away from a creature, without taking an attack against them without certain spells or abilities in place.
You're talking about if you're engaged in combat, hand-to-hand combat with them, you get that. Your enemy will get that opportunity attack if you try to disengage from them. All right, on to what's next.
The rogue. I like how we held it for like the exact same period. So yes. for all you people who are listening who are longtime fans of D&D, the rogue is your generic replacement of a thief. They're known for stealth, agility, a mastery of skills with their hands, picking locks, disarming traps, stealing things from people's pockets. They're great at long-ranged weaponry. And they're actually very good at close quarters combat when using certain weapons, like the dagger, which is a dexterity-based weapon. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And they have a lot of quickness and special abilities, which we'll talk about when we do the standalone episode, that lets them get in close, hit, and then actually walk out of combat, like we were just talking that you can't, without taking that engagement attack.
Oh, can they?
Yes, they can.
Really? Do tell.
So they have an ability.
Yes.
Disengage.
Oh, they've got disengage.
They have disengage.
Okay.
So they have the ability, like I was just saying, that they can just step away from that combat. It's called disengage. And they can take it as a bonus action, which allows them to run up, attack, and then step back, and they take the time to move away in a way that they can't get attacked.
Interesting. I love this. The one thing in my research here talking about they're favoring sneak attacks and precision strikes to outmaneuver and outwit and outlast. Wait, no, that's Survivor. But I love the idea of them like sneaking up behind somebody, just like slashing their throat and like going away, like
ducking out. Yeah,
like proficiency in stealth.
Yeah, which we're not going to get into subclasses today, but there is a subclass called the assassin that is that exact slit the throat, long arrow shot. And, you know, we think about assassins in medieval times, the poison and daggers. But nowadays, assassination often has a sniper rifle long range component. There's your sniper rifle of the day, is your bow and arrow. They can make that shot disappear from the rooftop and nobody ever finds them.
That's right. Interesting. They're gone before the arrow even hits the person and kills them. They're out of the picture.
So like I said, this is once again going to be one of the races that we're going to prioritize our dexterity as the highest score to make sure that you're stealthy, agile, and able to use the light weapons that are in the D&D manual, the light and versatile weapons that you can use your dexterity as your modifier instead of your strength. Most prominent, your daggers.
Love those daggers.
Yes.
So dexterity should be first. Now this is so next is you have the option. Either go for intelligence as your second ability score, your next highest ability score, especially if you want to excel at things like investigation, or there's an archetype. You get the roguish archetype at level 3. So if you're going to go for the arcane trickster archetype, you want to emphasize intelligence over charisma. But you want to, so in your second score, go for intelligence or go for charisma if you want to emphasize those deception and more of the social interaction of your rogue. So those would be, it's an either or on those. Which is also interesting because the rogue is a class that upsets the balance on so many aspects of the game, in my opinion, that it's not surprising that on the quick bold, your abilities that they're trying to tell you upsets the natural balance. You know, right. The second time that you're having dexterity, and then they're like, go with your intelligence. Well, who the heck's going to use intelligence besides a wizard, which we'll talk about in a little bit? Who's going to use intelligence for anything? Well, these guys will.
Oh, exactly.
So let's dive into the class features of the rogue. So their hit die is a 1d8.
Yep.
And so a little lower than your paladin, which the paladin and
the ranger were
1d10. So this is a 1d8. So you're not getting as much back on each of those dice as you would with those characters, but
which also makes sense because your rogue doesn't tend to be one of your most physically domineering people. Right. They tend to be athletic, but not physically domineering.
Right, and that goes back towards, you'll see it in the proficiencies for armor. The only armor they're proficient in is light armor. Again, medium, heavy armor. You're not going to be stealthy wearing that kind of armor. So it makes perfect sense that your only proficiency would be in some type of light armor, if anything.
Specifically, heavy armor actually gives you a disadvantage on stealth rolls. Disadvantage, just as a quick reminder, you roll the d20 twice and take the lower of the two rolls and then add your modifier to it. So if you're trying to sneak around, this is what we were talking about with your fighter. If I'm not mistaken, your fighter he's actually wearing medium armor, actually.
Yes.
So you don't have that disadvantage, but a fighter would typically be wearing medium or heavy armor. It's very difficult for somebody to sneak with that kind of stuff.
Correct. And I still have that crazy
You
stealth.
got the crazy dex, yeah.
Yeah, you better believe it. Now, weapon proficiency, simple weapons, and a lot of your typical things like hand crossbows, long swords, rapiers, short swords, all those things your rogue will have proficiency in.
They also end up with a very special tool proficiency with thieves' tools.
Yes.
Now, the only people in the game who have the capability of picking a lock, either on a door or a chest, are those who actually have thieves' tools. The people who have proficiency in the thieves' tools automatically are the rogue. So you can be a fighter, you can be a wizard, you can be whatever. You can have thieves' tools and use them to try to pick a lock. However, only the rogues get to add their proficiency bonus to that roll. Everybody else is just a straight roll on their dexterity.
Right. That's great. I mean, it's definitely getting that +2, +3, +4.
Yeah, based on
whatever level you're at, it can be a big help in succeeding on on your roll for.
And it's one more thing. It's one more thing that makes them distinct.
Yes, for sure. What else do they get? Oh my god, there's so many skills to choose from. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, there's so much to dive into.
That's the problem with all of these races. You know, all of these classes.
We're
hitting them all on the high points, and we're going through. We're going to come back and we're going to go deep dives into each of these things, because the bottom line is we really cannot spend the decent amount of time on each of these things. We'll be here for 20 hours.
I want to talk quickly about some of the. I just love these so much. The pop culture, pop culture inspiration for rogues. So I like the rogue idea of Han Solo being a rogue.
He's such a smooth talker and operator.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of the sneaking ability, but he was a smuggler. But to me, that's always the charisma in Han Solo. He talks his way in and out of everything.
Yeah. The other one, because there's a rogue subclass for swashbucklers themselves. So think of Jack Sparrow. You can build a pirate. There is a specific subclass for rogues called swashbucklers. But
you have heard of me.
Exactly. Thank you, Jack. Jack made an appearance on the show. That's impressive. We're only 7-8 episodes in, and
like that.
We're getting some really big stars. The last inspiration I want to mention, I really dig this one, Catwoman.
Yeah, I was a little surprised when I saw this one come up.
Why were you surprised?
Well, I've always believed in the idea of a rogue being possibly good or evil, but I've always looked at them on the more, not the evil side, no more slimy side, not necessarily evil, just kind of like, not the most trustworthy of person.
Sure.
But, this is talking about the morally gray aspect of the idea. And really, I should have been looking at the rogue as like, there could be a good rogue out there. I wonder.
Yes. You're thinking about something.
Would Robin Hood fit? I know he would fit the ranger characteristic, but as a person who steals from the rich and gives to the poor,
sure,
and has to perform all those ambushes. I'm sorry, but go back to Catwoman.
No, Robin Hood's another one, but I just love that description. I was reading it somewhere about morally gray actions in a good party, and they say her immorally or criminal methods might earn the disapproval of the party, but she is a good ally to have on your side. So I love the way to play a rogue, because again, in an adventuring party, your rogue is going to help you kill the enemy. So in a way they're on your side, but they're always working their own angle. That I feel like the rogue always has this agenda that they're following, that they're with the party, but not necessarily always on the same page.
Yeah, no, I get that. And that's kind of where like that I was coming in with my thought process, is that I don't know if I would ever trust a rogue inside my party. I would be constantly doing checks to make sure none of my stuff was stolen from me or something like that. And actually now you're saying that, and that clued off something else in my head. The idea of, bad things for good intentions. Vast majority of people nowadays that I've seen, they will play a rogue, usually on the neutral or even on the evil side, because they enjoy playing things on the more evil side just because it's different. Mm-hmm. But if you're playing a party, the whole party will be that way, not just the rogue. But if you're playing a party who's mostly good people, how do you justify the evil that a rogue does in the overall good of the campaign? And if you're big role players, that can generate a good amount of role play back and forth throughout the adventure. And even in the combat, you see a rogue who, and just the other day he was joking, but he stole, the Paladin has a holy symbol, and he stole the Paladin's holy symbol just to be a prick. You're about to die, maybe I'll heal you. I'll think about it. And mm-hmm. how do you deal with a character that you have to constantly deal with his pestiness, but you also need him. And you'll see a lot of shorts about 2-3 years ago, right when the beginning of the pandemic came around. There was a lot of TikToks created about D&D and people kind of saying how there are a lot of comic shorts and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them revolved around the idea of what happened to the rogue. the rogue was that pain in the ass and the rogue died, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh yeah, but he was good and doing this or doing that.
Right. It was just like, just thinking about all this, it made me, the other character it made me think of was in the latest Indiana Jones movie, Dial of Destiny, Teddy, the kid.
I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it yet?
I have not.
Okay. So Teddy, who's this kid, is kind of like a street urchin, petty thief. You know, he picks people's pockets and things like that. But it's like he's kind of part of the indie team and kind of helping out, but he can't help but steal Indiana Jones' watch. Like it's just like it just made me perfectly think of the rogue. Like he's helping you, but he's also he's helping you with one hand, but the other hand is picking your pocket. So
the Mummy, Rachel Weisz's brother, he's always stealing something from everyone, but he has knowledge. He's a smart guy.
Right.
He's just incompetent. He's just got to steal something from everyone.
You got to steal something.
But yes, they're a lot of fun. It can be a lot of a fun character. And again, depending on how much role play is going on inside the party, you can create that paladin or cleric looking disapprovingly on them, whereas they are, constantly often doing their pesky things.
Yes, indeed. And with that, let's move on to our next class, the Sorcerer. So the Sorcerer, Joe, what is a Sorcerer?
Well, the Sorcerer is, you were talking about in the beginning of the podcast about how the wizard is the only one that really has to do all that studying. Well, the Sorcerer is somebody who has that ability innate inside of them. Very frequently, that innate ability is coming from some type of dragon blood someplace in their past that lends them their power and lends them their ability. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just a touch of a demon or the blessing of a dryad that has given them this power, and it just flows through them. And that's one of the cool things about the rogue, is that it kind of creates a dichotomy in my head, is that it's either the dragon or it's some random element that is giving them the power. And when we talk about the actual subclass in its own episode, we're going to talk about what's called wild magic, which is like an effect that it's an unexpected consequence of using magic at certain points in certain conditions, and we'll get into all that. You don't get that when you have the draconic bloodline of it. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, you got the controlled draconic bloodline and the wild stuff.
So this made me think of something, Joe, when you're talking about wild magic. So I played a sorcerer, the rabbit, the Aragorn sorcerer, Oswald.
Yeah.
Oswald the Lucky Rabbit.
Yeah.
But just briefly talking about wild magic, because it was just one of my favorite spells, Chaos Bolt. Which was an amazing spell. So Chaos Bolt was it started off as a level 1 spell, and the damage was 2d8. So you roll 2d8 dice, and what happened was the type of damage differed based on whatever you rolled. So it was really a chaotic spell. And so what happened was you would roll. So for example, you'd roll your 2d8, one of them's a 4, one of them's a 7. So you can pick between those two types of damage. For example, 7 was psychic damage.
Right.
So you could choose whichever one you wanted. So there was always this chaotic nature to the spell. However, when you rolled the 2d8, if they both were if they landed on the same number, you could then so it did damage to that person, but then what happened was the spell jumped to somebody else within 30 feet. Yeah. So you could make multiple attacks with a single spell. So it was very chaotic.
As long as you kept getting those doubles.
As long as anytime you rolled a double, rolled a double on the doubles on the d8s, it could jump to another person. It could never go back to the same person that you already hit, but you could go on to somebody else. So I think there was one time I think I hit
6. I think it was 6 nulls. I think you bounce.
It was crazy.
It was insane.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, I'm a fighter in my Tuesday night campaign, and I I took the aberrant dragon mark at one point when we were leveling up and I was getting a feat.
Right.
And it allowed me to take a cantrip and a magical spell. I took prestidigitation as the cantrip, but for the spell, I took Chaos Bolt.
Chaos Bolt.
So last night we ended up in a combat.
Nice.
And I specifically, we were surprising them. So I'm like, let me hit this guys with a Chaos Bolt and maybe I'll get a bounce. I didn't. I got like 7 and a 2. So I used the psychic damage because we were fighting dragon. But it was just like, ooh, I remember this. Let me use this. This will be fun. And it just turned out to be like, wah, 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 wah.
You throw a nat 20 in there and you could really do some.
Oh, forget it. You can keep bouncing that up. And
yeah. Oh, for sure.
But yeah, they're an interesting class.
They really are. So let's talk. Let's
their whole concept is about screw your demon packs and screw your studying. My ability's in my blood,
right?
Versus someplace else.
It could also lead to a lot of arrogance. So I could understand this wild magic, like it just kind of flows out of them, and they don't necessarily. So a wizard has used his intelligence to learn and master these spells, but a sorcerer has just kind of been imbued with this magical ability. So they haven't necessarily spent the time to master the spells like a wizard has. So I could see that more chaotic nature in a lot of their spell casting. So that could be a very interesting way to play the character.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about building a sorcerer. So right off the bat, again, charisma is going to be your highest ability score. That's what's powering your spells. So that's what's behind your spell casting is your charisma ability.
Once again, one of the non-common stats jumping to the head of the line.
Yeah, it's very important as far as your spell casting. I like having a charismatic sorcerer. It all kind of plays into that.
Well, again, that comes into the idea. I believe in my own innate ability. Right. That's my charisma, my machoism in myself.
Yeah. And then follow that up with Constitution.
Yeah, these things are going to be kind of squishy if you're not careful.
Yeah, so get some HP in there, and then go right behind that with Dexterity. So either one of those, get a high AC, level up your HP.
So then they also tell you that they suggest a hermit background, somebody who's been out there, kind of studying off on their own, living in the outside, living in someplace in the wilderness, probably since you're by yourself, building up that ego that you were talking about, but perfecting their abilities before they headed out into the general world.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the hermit background. I know that's what Wizards of the Coast suggests. I just don't buy it. I don't think it plays into who or what a sorcerer is really all about. So I would probably disagree with choosing the hermit background.
I agree with you.
Again, wow.
I would think the folk hero or even the noble backgrounds would actually fit in better, because both the folk hero would be like the person who builds himself up too much from the fact of the people who worship him as a hero. Mm-hmm. And the noble background, we've already kind of talked about. This could be the guy who's like, look, I'm a noble. I'm this great person. I'm this fantastic thing. Screw all of you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but I just don't think that.
I agree. I think the hermit is a bit of a stretch, but I think they were trying to build it and prop it in something that was in the basic rules.
Even criminal. Like I could, again, going back to Honor Among Thieves, the D&D movie, Simon the So-So Sorcerer, what was he using his magical ability to do? He was doing one thing on stage and picking the pockets of all the people in the theater that were watching him.
And even the acolyte would fit in there too, because you think of it, like the hermit was just really a reach for me. I have to agree.
Yeah, there's so many other ways to play that are much better than choosing the hermit background. But how do you feel? So they talk about some of the spells that you want to choose off the bat. They talk about light, which I think is a great utility
cantrip, right?
Utility cantrip, prestidigitation.
it fits into
Look,
the charisma.
fresh cut grass.
Yes.
You can smell fresh cut grass.
It fits into the charisma idea where you can boost your voice or create this one thing or another. I think it fits in for the role, not necessarily for the play.
Right. Now, some more fun ones. Ray of Frost.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with it, but that's a lot of fun too. I've heard.
I mean, you make a ranged spell attack. I mean, it's 1d8 cold damage, which isn't bad.
Especially for first level.
For a first level. I mean, that goes up at the 5th level and 11th level.
Yeah.
I mean, 3d8 on a cantrip. Again.
Well, you got to get up there to level 11.
Well, you got to get up there. But even when you hit 5th level, for 2d8 for a cantrip.
Cantrip as a 1d8 is still pretty crazy.
Yeah. And then you got the same thing on... They also recommend Shocking Grasp as a...
It's more of a melee one. You have to be up there and grab them, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, if you are going to be a melee range, if somebody comes up to you and attacks you, you as the sorcerer aren't necessarily going to run into battle. But,
correct.
But if an opponent comes up to you and attacks you, you've got something that you can use on them when they come at you.
Which leads into the first level spell that they suggest, which is Shield.
Yes.
Shield is something you cast as a reaction that increases your AC by 5. So if somebody does break through the ranks, gets to you, they try to attack you, you can use this to try to block that attack.
Yes. And yet again, the other recommended first level spell,
Magic Missile.
Love this spell.
This spell comes up so frequently in so many different aspects because it is so versatile, so much utility out of it.
Well, it automatically hits.
That's the brilliant part of it.
So it's an attack spell that doesn't require an attack roll.
Correct.
So it's even though it's only 1d4.
Well, it's actually
1d4 plus 1.
3 1d4s.
Well, 3 1. But I'm saying each individual dart is 1d4 plus 1.
But think about that. That's still 3d4 plus 3 on one creature, and you guaranteed to hit with it. That's right. That's a pretty decent thing there.
It is. It really is. And won't get into all the things, but it as you level up, it powers up as
you get older,
as you get higher spell slots. So, but Magic Missile was always a favorite of mine with Fiang. It was a fun one because again, it's a guaranteed hit,
and you constantly rolled 3s on it. You were always up there.
It's great, when you roll high on them, it's very, very satisfying. But again, you don't have to focus all 3 darts on the same enemy. So you can, if you've got kobolds and things like that, lower level kind of minions, that you can start to do some significant damage on multiple creatures all at once.
Yep.
So it's interesting when I was looking at what races are good ones to play for a sorcerer. This is an interesting one. Fable, our next door neighbor, would appreciate this. The Tiefling.
Yep. Because
you get the +2 to charisma and a +1 to intelligence right off the bat. So that's a nice help for
definite, especially with that charisma modifier coming in there.
Yes, absolutely. So that'll be a lot of fun to play a Tiefling sorcerer. Like I said, I played a Haragon, which was a rabbit, and the whole backstory was that I was the magic rabbit in a magician's show. The magician was actually a sorcerer, and lightning struck one night, and his powers transferred to me as the rabbit. And I grew in size, and he shrank in size, and now I was this rabbit on the run from a very angry small magician who wanted his powers back. So there's all sorts of ways to play a sorcerer. But similar to the sorcerer, another spellcaster, Joe, is the warlock.
So I have the absolute least experience with the warlock of every single race. I think I've class. I think I've only DM'd somebody playing a warlock once, and that was when our friend Mike played a warlock in a campaign. I forget who his patron was, but it was something that didn't necessarily, he was playing a dwarf, and it was a patron that was a patron of water, I think it was, or moisture or liquid.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason why he picked it was because he had himself as a dwarf, he was very proficient at making beer, ale. It fed into that concept, and it was really good. He found an underground lake that this being happened to be partially inhabiting, and that's where he ended up getting his power. The idea of a warlock being that you make a pact or a deal with some higher power being, devil, deity, strange, unknown creature who lends you their power and allows you to use it. But they're going to call in that favor from time to time when they want certain things done. Mm-hmm. I was watching a play on a D&D play on the YouTube, and this kid was playing a warlock, and him and his group was exploring this ancient city, and all of a sudden he disappeared. Nobody knew he was gone. And then when he came back, nobody asked any questions. They go to the library of this place looking for a specific book. He had already lifted it because his patron didn't want them to have it.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
That's an interesting twist.
Yeah. So as a DM, it can be a little difficult to DM a warlock unless you either A, ignore the idea that their patron may want them to do things that is counter to what the group is, or maybe just nothing to do with the group and they just disappear.
Right. Or
you have to build that into your storyline if you're trying to be that inclusive aspect of the backgrounds.
Right. So how would you, or what are the recommendations for building a basic warlock?
No, shockingly enough, it's going to be the charisma again, because remember, charisma is your ability to interact with other people is one of the primary aspects, and you're making a deal with a patron of some sort. That charisma is where you're drawing your power from. So it's definitely there. Constitution is going to pick up right after that.
And remind us why is Constitution so important?
It's all about your hit points.
Yes, it is. And again, I mean,
well, it's also interesting. Last episode and the beginning of this episode, we're talking about Constitution as a middle stat, and we see it here as a top 1-2 stat.
Yeah.
But it's because of the lack of armor. Most of the other races that have it, and some other classes that have it as a 3-4 stat, they all have some type of armor to boost their AC in general. The warlocks, they don't really have that. They get light armor, but they're not dealing with this extra shield and all this kind of stuff. It's not in their nature to wear this stuff. So the higher hit points are required if something gets through.
So my question, would it be better to focus on dexterity and level up your AC? Because if you're going to be a ranged spellcaster, do you want to protect yourself after you cast a spell from somebody coming back and attacking you? Do you want to up your AC instead, and then maybe put Constitution third?
So that follows the logic that we've been describing so far. But I think a counter argument to everything that we've been arguing about using dexterity to do that is to build up your hit points.
Right.
Now, in principle, I think you're right that having a higher AC is long term is going to be better because you're going to generate more misses by having a higher AC. That being said, in the short term, it can seem very appealing to not care as much what's going to hit you as being able to survive that hit. So 5 extra hit points might make a lot big of a difference in a lower level than 1 extra AC. So and that's the other thing. If you have 2 dexterity stat points, that ups your AC by 1. If you have 2 Constitution stat points, that ups your hit points by 1 per level. It stacks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because your hit points are going up on every level.
And you're getting that base +1 every level for those 2 hit points as well.
Right.
So
your AC is kind of more stable than focusing on the HP. So that makes a lot of sense.
It's really a trade-off, and I can see why people would rather suck up the damage and be able to suck up more than being able to just deflect it or avoid it.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. So some of the other features to the Warlock are 1d8 on the hit dice. Joe mentioned they've got the proficiency in just light armor and simple weapons because they're really a spellcaster. It's really more of a ranged attack, so they're not in the throes of action when it comes to the battles. So that's really what they're focused on. And Joe talked about the patron. We'll get into all those details more so on the standalone episodes. But yeah, you do have a patron that is really granting you your powers
based upon a pact, usually,
yes.
Which, like I said,
a deal with the devil.
Yes, which oftentimes has consequences.
So who can you make a pact with? It's not necessarily just a deity.
It's not a deity. Like I said, there was I mean, this is really something to dive into the episode with the main class episode with, but that I cannot remember the name of it. He found it, and then I found it in the general rules as well. Not the general rules, one of the specific books. I forget what it was called, but it was just a being of water. You can make a pact with the devil. You can make the pact with the deity. You can make a pact with, I think one of them is like an outworthy Feywild creature that has powers that you can really make this in. It's really, so I think it was called the Great Old One. Yeah. There you go. You got new research there.
Well, this is about the Silver Surfer.
Right. Oh, that's his. Okay. To the Great Old One. Okay. But yeah, they're
something similar to the Great Old One.
Yes. There are plenty of deities that or beings of power willing to share for something to be done for them.
Interesting. So before I talk about the Silver Surfer, let's talk about two races that are good with +2s to charisma are your half elves and tieflings. And tieflings get that nice fire resistance as well. So that's a nice feature for them to have as a warlock.
Plus that hellish rebuke when somebody does get too close to you.
Yeah, for sure. But as Joe was saying, so a really great example of a warlock in service to a
higher
power with the new Spelljammer material. Silver Surfer is a perfect one in the space plane, so to speak. So that would be a really interesting one too. Could you have a surfboard in D&D?
I think you could modify a flying carpet statistics and make it a board.
Well, that would be cool.
See, I'm doing some research while you're talking about that. I'm looking it up. There is a Great Old One in D&D. That's why it clued me in. I'm like, yeah, there is a Great Old One. So it has however you get your power. Again, we'll get into that with that episode, but it's really interesting that way. Silver Surfer is the Herald of Galactus.
He's the Herald of Galactus. Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. So awesome. That leads us to our final class.
What I said, my favorite.
Well, I'm glad we finally got to it. So what is it, Joe?
It's the wizard.
The wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Joe.
You're a wizard, Joseph.
Yes.
So,
I'm a what?
I'm a what now? You're a wizard, Harry. So I think one of the reasons why I really dug the wizard in the first place is, I know everybody thinks it's lame that, they have to do all the digging and all the work. I like the idea of a reward system. He works and busts his ass on something, and then he gets that power because he memorized it, he learned it, he worked at it, he did it over and over and over again. This is a guy who takes high intelligence, something I've always liked, and that's why when I made my wizard character, I, of course, had the high intelligence as possible. High intelligence to learn and understand how the mystic arcs work and take literally no special ability and build yourself into having the special ability.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the wizards have the widest selection of spells.
I think that is correct.
I thought I read that somewhere. So I guess being a bonus to having to learn the spells and keep them written down, they get the widest selection of available spells, if I recall correctly.
That sounds about right. Regardless of where it is that It adds a lot more role play flair, I think, for the wizard also. Talking about writing them all down. So when I created my wizard, I was a stone giant.
Okay.
And I had a lot of fun doing that because they weren't overly, maybe it was a half giant, I can't remember exactly. They weren't overly, intelligent as a species, as a race, but I made mine very intelligent. But, when it came to the idea of having a spell book, I got a little creative. And instead of having a typical book or this, that, and the other thing, I had my guy carry a pouch. And inside the pouch were stones. And inscribed on the stones, like you might expect something of a more tribal society to do, was my spells.
Okay.
And I was just like, ooh, this is a cool way to tweak this. And then when I role played my wizard, I went up and every time I took a spell, I looked up the Latin for that spell, and I would speak the Latin in game, and then I'd say, "Okay, this is the spell that I'm using," and it was kind of a cool concept because it was like, yeah, this is my attempt at diving into the role play.
Nice. That was, I recall that. I recall a lot of Latin being used.
So, like I was saying, that the primary stat that you're going to use for these guys is intelligence, because you need to be understanding of the mystic arts, the wisdom of the magic.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, definitely intelligence, because that's your,
that's your primary spell cast.
Absolutely. And it makes perfect sense, especially having to write everything down and remember everything.
Yep.
It all plays into that ability. Now, Constitution and Dexterity, they recommend, are the next two ones.
Right. Again, same debate that we've been discussing this whole time. Constitution, boost up your hit points. Dexterity, boosting up the ability to avoid your AC.
Right. So it just depends on how you want to play it. But I again, Constitution's a great one because your hit points do increase as you level up. AC really pretty much stays exactly the same, unless you get armor
multiple points. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So one of the other things is they then suggest in the basic rules, if you're going to go with the school of enchantment, that you should use charisma. Now, one of the things in the basic rules is, and we'll talk about it when we get to that we say this a lot. We talk about it when we get to that class dedicated episode. There are so many different types of places, ways, subclasses for the wizard. In the Player's Handbook, I believe the wizard had more subclasses than any other class in the Player's Handbook, because there are 7 different schools of magic.
Right.
And one of them being enchantment, which is based upon your ability to convince people on things that you're doing, thus the charisma bonus.
Yes. And after that, they talk about what spells to choose. So some of your cantrips, they recommend Mage Hand, which is a fantastic utility spell. Highly recommend Mage Hand. It comes in handy in all sorts of situations.
Yeah.
Casting Light.
Yep.
Again, useful if you don't have dark vision, but so many of the races do have.
It's a very utilitarian cantrip if you have people who don't have dark vision.
Correct. And they also recommend Ray of Frost.
Yeah.
Which we talked about. So that's,
I liked it. It's all right.
It's a 1d8. So it's a helpful spell. And again, it reduces the speed by 10 feet. So if you want to keep someone away, not getting at you very easily, it's a good way to slow them down.
Again, I had a little fun with mine. I took Toll the Dead. And I would play For Whom the Bell Tolls by Metallica every time I cast this cantrip. It was a little way of being my own,
Yes. You love your music. It's like you really should be a bard, because you're always singing.
You have no idea how much I want to try to be a bard. I have so many ideas for being a bard.
I'm sure you do.
One of my ideas is taking a Kenku who can't talk, and then having all of my spells as a wizard based upon little clips of music from different songs and everything like that. Kenku can only repeat sounds that they've heard. So every time he would cast a spell, it would be based upon a song that somebody else used.
That could be very interesting. All right, so let's talk about. So, what are some of the first level spells
Well,
that should be in your spell book?
let's jump to it real quick. There's your magic missile again. I mean, it is
Yes.
such a utilitarian,
Absolutely.
perfect thing for this. Burning hands is a very interesting. You put your hands together, you create a wave of fire 15 feet in front of you. Again, good for people getting too close.
Right. And what else? Charm person. Again, a very good utility. Not necessarily. It's not a fighting
Right.
spell necessarily, but it's a good utility spell. Featherfall. They recommend.
Featherfall is a very interesting spell.
Yeah.
When you're falling, you can cast this, and on I think same number of people as your modifier. Oh, 5 falling creatures. Instead of falling the 50, 60 feet and hurting yourselves, you kind of just gently fall down like a feather would.
That's very helpful if
you're in higher heights. Yeah.
Yes, like when we were in that flying castle.
Yeah. Fortunately, nobody fell. That was on your side.
No, fortunately. We're now in the current campaign. We're in the pit, or we're near a pit. So in case anybody falls, it would be nice if somebody had Featherfall.
Yeah.
And Mage Armor. Mage Armor is another one they recommend.
Yeah, it's a little AC boost for you, because wizards are not going to have shit for AC or hit points.
Yes. So that'll be very helpful. Forest Gnome. So we're talking about races that are good for wizards. Forest Gnome is a great one because you get a +2 to intelligence. And what's nice is you automatically know the minor illusion cantrip.
Mm-hmm.
So you automatically get that one, so you can pick other cantrips as well. So you don't have to use up one of your cantrip selections for minor illusion. You automatically get that as part of the Forest Gnome.
The High Elf, you get your +1 to your intelligence, and then you get a +2 to your dex to kind of build up your AC a little bit built in. Not to mention, the High Elf gets recovery of all of its spell slots on a short rest as opposed to a long rest.
Yes, that is very helpful. 4 hours instead of 8.
Yep.
That can be very helpful. And also the half elf gets a +2 to charisma, but they get a +1 to two others. So that's where you can put it to your intelligence and your constitution and bump those up. Plus you get 2 skill proficiencies, which is always a helpful thing. And lastly, some of the class features for wizard. Just 1d6 on the hit dice. So, as we like to say, wizards are squishy. They're not armor wearers. They're not going to have high HP. So you want to boost those up as much as you can. No armor proficiency, weapon proficiencies, daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, just some light weaponry.
Very light weaponry. Yeah.
So there's not a lot there. They're really a spellcaster. That's what they're meant to be. And that's really all there is to, again, without going into lots and lots of detail. That pretty much covers the highlights of the wizard and all the last 6 of 12 classes.
We did it.
There's been a lot of information to cover. So Joe is going on a 2-month hiatus for youth sports.
Yes, I unfortunately am overbooked.
Not unfortunately, that's a good thing.
Well,
what are you coaching, soccer?
Yes.
Awesome.
We're actually, my friend and I are running the league this year. So we anticipate, so we're coaching 2 teams. We're running the league. So working up to this point has been quite harried and crazy with everything going on.
I'm sure.
And now going forward, it's looking like it's going to get a little easier, but now I'm going to have to dedicate my usual recording night to actually practices.
Yes. So we've got so what we have to look forward to in the future is once Joe returns, we're going to start
the return of Joe.
That's right. We'll put a countdown clock, and we're gonna do character creation. We're gonna start doing some gameplay.
Yep.
In the meantime, we've got a bunch of interviews. We might do some one shots in between with not necessarily character creation, but maybe just some gameplay with a guest DM. But we've got interviews with an author, a psychologist who wrote a book about using D&D for therapy and how to use D&D in the classroom as well. So we've got some interviews on that. We've got some interviews with other people who have been DMs, players, talking a lot about their experiences as beginners and some suggestions they have for you getting started. So we've got a lot of interesting things to talk about over the next 2 months while Joe is away. And then we'll get back to the gameplay and actually the game mechanics of creating a new character and playing that character.
Right, and then we'll do a quick run through, one shot of me and Andrew running that character through a very base level introductory adventure to see how everything works mechanically, like you were saying.
Yes, I think it'll be a lot of fun. We have to figure. There's so much we have to figure out. We have to figure out what race it's going to be, what class it's going to be. I'm
all for the dice roll, baby.
We'll randomize it.
We'll talk about it, but I think we do it all based upon the dice roll, and then we'll work out like the details, and then of course we got all the class episodes coming up where we're going to do deep dives into individual classes and talk about that. And I think what we're going to do is so that we don't get too monotonous with that, we might interspace that with the rest of the things. So we're not doing here's another class. I don't think
we're going to do 12 episodes in a row.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
That'd be too much. Maybe once a month.
Yeah, something like a featurette or something.
Because there's 12 classes, so 12 classes, that's a whole year's worth of. Yeah. So maybe do one a month and intersperse with other things.
So guys, got a lot of content coming up. I'm going to be stepping away for a little bit, but I'm looking forward to coming back in November when everything's all said and done with the soccer and I can dive back in. I don't know. Is Catherine still thinking about doing her interview?
Yes, with my wife. I will interview my wife, and we'll talk about pop culture, Dungeons and Dragons in pop culture. So that'll be a fun one. We're both big lovers of all things nerdy. So we'll talk about how D&D kind of shows up in all those different places. So I'm really looking forward to that. From Buffy to Big Bang to
Community,
Stranger Things to Community,
everywhere. It pops up everywhere.
It'll be a lot of fun in music.
It's in Star Trek.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of fun to talk about there. So thanks everybody. Yes, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to talking to you next episode, and thank you again.
Peace and long life.
And we'll see you. We'll see you in 2 months, Joe.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legends, Loot, and Lore. We hope you've enjoyed immersing yourself in the realms of legends, uncovering hidden loot, and delving into captivating lore. But the journey doesn't end here. For exclusive content, behind-the-scenes insights, and access to our community, visit legendslootandlore.supercast.com. There you'll be able to support the podcast, where you can join our Discord server for lively discussions and subscriber-only content, and connect with fellow enthusiasts. Stay connected with us on Instagram and Facebook at Legends, Loot, and Lore to continue on the quest. By following our social media channels, you'll be the first to know about upcoming episodes, bonus content, and exciting announcements. If you've enjoyed your time with us, we kindly ask you to rate and subscribe to this podcast. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue producing captivating episodes and embarking on new quests. Thank you for being a part of our journey. We're thrilled to have you by our side as we unravel the legends, uncover the loot, and delve deeper into the lore. Until next time.